All right, we're going to start. Hi, everyone. I'm Don Saucier. I'm the Faculty Associate Director of our Teaching and Learning Center. You found your way to our professional development series, and we're very excited about that. We're going to begin today, as we do every time, with a land acknowledgement.
All right, Don, just give me a thumbs up when you see what I want you to see. Okay, cool. Here we go.
As the first land-grant institution established under the 1862 Morrill Act, we acknowledge that the state of Kansas is, historically, home to many native nations, including the Kaw, Osage, and Pawnee, among others. Furthermore, Kansas is the current home to 4 federally recognized native nations: the Prairie Band Potawatomi, the Kickapoo Tribe of Kansas, the Iowa Tribe of Kansas and Nebraska, and the Sac and Fox Nation Missouri in Kansas and Nebraska.
Many native nations utilize the western plains of Kansas as their hunting grounds, and others, such as the Delaware, were moved through this region during Indian removal efforts to make way for white settlers. It's important to acknowledge this, since the land that serves as the foundation of this institution was, and still is, stolen land.
We remember these truths because K-State's status as a land-grant institution is a story that exists within ongoing settler colonialism, and rests on the dispossession of indigenous peoples and nations from their lands. These truths are often invisible to many. The recognition that K-State's history begins and continues through indigenous contexts is essential.
Please remember
These truths,
because we still remember.
Thank you. Our professional development series meets every Wednesday at noon over the course of the academic year. We read in real time over Zoom. You found that link. It's going to be the same link every time. We also archive our events and post them on our website later for asynchronous viewing. So after today's event and after Dr. Moorberg does an amazing job, you're going to say, oh my goodness, my colleagues need to see this too. They'll have that opportunity. We'll post them a little bit. You also have the opportunity to earn a professional development certificate as a faculty or staff member or as a graduate student. And we'll have the information for that dropped into our chat right about now. Also, if you're a faculty member who is looking to not only increase your own teaching excellence, but increase the teaching excellence of others, you may potentially be selected as a TLC Fellow. So if you'd like to apply for that and be considered, that information is also available at that link. Next week, actually, a couple more before we get to the actual events announcements. We also have some wonderful accessibility talks kind of coming up. So we have some wonderful events coming from the Academic Affairs and Innovation Office. Our instructional design team is doing a wonderful set of events. I believe we have 5 of them coming up over the next couple of weeks in our semester. And we've just dropped that into the chat. So this is great information for making our courses more accessible as we progress in our pursuit of inclusivity in higher education, which is something we should all be pursuing, in my opinion. We also talked last week about the Wakunzi Teaching Conference, and there are opportunities to potentially apply for a scholarship to pay for some of that conference if you would like to attend. That conference is kind of like the anti-conference. It's a really kind of cool, like almost teaching scout camp. Highly recommended. I've been there. It's transformative. And then we have that information for you in the chat if you're interested in applying. We'll pay for some of your way potentially. We also, at the end of this semester, we'll have our SOTL Showcase. Our SOTL Showcase is an opportunity for us to share scholarship in teaching and learning, which is basically research that relates to teaching, innovative ideas related to teaching, those sorts of things. Amazing event. We're going to have oral presentations, poster presentations, and we'd love you to apply. I'm letting you know that we're going to have that call for proposals coming up in the near future. And then finally, next week, we have a great conversation with Dr. Doris Carroll from the College of Education about creating engaging classroom communication for student success. Very excited to see Dr. Carroll lead us through that. But then today, we have Colby Moorberg. Colby Moorberg is going to be talking to us about the K-State Open and Alternative Textbook Initiative, open textbook platforms, and accessibility. Dr. Moorberg, thank you so much for being here, and the floor is yours.
All right, thank you. Happy Open Education Week, everyone. So this first full week in March is always Open Education Week, and there's events scheduled all around the world. And there's a website. If you Google OE Week or Open Education Week, there's a whole bunch of other events that are all related to open textbooks and open education resources and so on. So I encourage you to check that out if you are interested. I'm going to drop a link into the chat, which is my Linktree page. And at the very bottom of it is my slides for today. I'm going to be referring to a whole bunch of different resources, and I thought I'd just share the slides with all the hyperlinks in case you guys wanted to peruse those on your own. All right, let me share my screen real quick. So what we're going to do today is first, well, we'll start off with some slides, and then we'll kind of move into sort of a demonstration of the two different open textbook platforms. But the focus of today, or the topics, are I'll first talk about my path into developing open textbooks, and then I'll give an overview of the K-State Open and Alternative Textbook Initiative. And then we'll give two overviews of the two leading platforms for developing open textbooks, LibreTexts and Pressbooks. I'll talk about the pros and cons of each, at least from my perspective, and I'll give some demonstrations of those. And as I do those demos, I'm going to talk about some accessibility things to consider for both of those platforms. So that's the plan. So the first project I worked on for open textbooks was a lab manual I developed for my introductory soil science course. So we have usually between like 80 and 120 students in this course. And for the lab, we have them split into 4 or 5 sections. And when I started at K-State, there was a lab manual that was used by my predecessor. And the lab manual cost more than the course textbook did. So the lab manual was like $165, if I remember correctly. And I just thought it was a sort of an outrageous price. And so I actually went back to my co-author, David Krause. And when I was a grad student at North Carolina State, I was a GTA for his Intro to Soils course lab. And I knew that they had developed an open textbook for their introductory soil science class that was pretty much the exact same that I was teaching. And so I reached out to see if they could, if we can get permissions to take their sort of in-house developed lab manual and create a K-State version, and then in the process, publish it so it can be widely used. And to date, this lab manual is used by nearly 200 different soils instructors from around the world. So it's had pretty broad use, and it's had a big impact beyond just my course. But for my students, we've saved, I think we're heading towards $180,000 in textbook costs since we adopted this. So it's been a big hit. I have a couple links here. So one is to the landing page for New Prayer Press. So this was officially published through the K-State Library's digital press that's used for open textbooks. And so that link goes to the landing page there. There's also a web book, which I'll be showing later on. And if you're interested, we also published in a peer-reviewed journal, Natural Sciences Education, the development of this lab manual. So that was my first project, and the current version of it is built out in Pressbooks. My second project was the Soil and Water Conservation and Annotated Bibliography book. And so for a more advanced course, Grand 635 Soil and Water Conservation, for that course, we had a textbook that it was fine. It was relatively affordable. It was like $35 a copy for a paperback. But the issue was the students weren't reading it. But for an advanced course like this, it's very applied. What I realized is that there's a whole bunch of both government publications as well as extension publications from lots of different resources or lots of different sources. And they're all freely available online, but they're not necessarily openly licensed. And so what I did to sort of get around that is I developed an annotated bibliography with the students' help. And so we have 20 students that are chapter co-authors in this book. And we developed this annotated bibliography where instead of a traditional like chapter reading assignment, the students go and read an extension publication or a government publication on a particular topic. So it works pretty well. And this one I built within Pressbooks. So I have 2 Pressbooks versions, and there is a peer-reviewed journal article related to it. And then my current project that's somewhat still ongoing is the Soil and Water Conservation Laboratory Manual. So this is one where I actually started building it in Pressbooks, and by the time I got it nearly all the way finished, I heard that K-State, along with all the other K-Board institutions, were signing on to a system-wide license with LibreText, which is the other leading textbook publishing platform. And so what I ended up doing is I had LibreText, what they call Harvest, my Pressbooks version, and they brought it into their platform. And then I've been working on all of my edits to it ever since then within LibreText. And so the plan is once this is officially published, it will be all within LibreText. So that one's kind of interesting because I have it on both platforms, and I wanted to just kind of get a sense for what LibreText is like, since I have experience with Pressbooks. So now I have sort of a sense for what both platforms are like and what the pros and cons of each are. I wanted to give an overview of the Open and Alternative Textbook Initiative. I know some of the people on here, Andy, for example, have gotten grants from the Open and Alternative Textbook Initiative. This began back in 2013 with a grant that was written in the previous year by Brian Linshield and Andy Bennett, Andy Bennett, and the librarian at the time, and I'm forgetting her name. But they wrote a grant to the Student Government Association, and that funded essentially the first round of mini grants that they could use for developing this initiative. And so the grants were up to $5,000. And eventually the program got popular enough, but was going to no longer receive funding from the Student Government Association, that they started looking at ways to fund the program and make it more sustainable for the long run. And so in 2016, they developed a $10 course fee. And how this course fee is set up is each course that's tagged with this little open textbook icon on the right, all those courses have a $10 fee that's associated with enrolling in that course. $9 of that goes to the instructor of the course to help them develop a open textbook, or in some cases adopt existing textbooks for their course. And $1 of it goes back to the initiative to help fund feature grants. And then since then, back in 2021, which was initially scheduled for 2020, but things happened, so it got pushed back a year. But in 2021, there was a campaign through the K-State Foundation, which ultimately raised $500,000 to help fund this program. And so currently, all of our grants that are being provided to instructors are being funded through these donations. So we had just over 1,000 gifts and $500,000 raised. So if anybody donated to that, thanks for that. All right, so I want to talk about the application process for these MIDI grants. So one thing I recommend is attending an Open Alternative Textbook Initiative information session. So this isn't required, but it does help us get a sense for kind of what your goals are, and you can get some advice on kind of how to put your grant proposal together, and also give you some things to think about for how you might want to actually approach your book. The grant is actually a pretty straightforward, so it's not like a 15-page NSF grant. It's a 2-page proposal, and what we're looking for is a general description of the course. So is it like freshman or sophomore level, or upper level undergraduate, or a graduate course? How many students are enrolled in it? What sort of content is taught? Just kind of general context for us to consider. And then the rest of the proposal is generally focused on a plan for how you plan to actually develop this open textbook. So the development of it, if you're going to remix content from existing resources, or if you have some other plan. And then one thing we have pretty much made a requirement for all funded projects now is that it's on some sort of platform where it can be distributed to a wider audience than just K-State students. So initially, in the early history of this initiative, we had some individuals that would develop content that would only live within Canvas, which is fine for that course. But the issue is it doesn't benefit any students or faculty that are outside of that Canvas course. And so now we generally require all products that are created through this to be either on LibreText or Pressbooks. And we do have some exceptions. So there are some really interesting examples. I'm gonna blank on his name right now, but the gentleman that teaches evolution over in the Division of Biology, he uses R for his program, for his course, and it's a very data intensive class. And so R with I think the R Shiny app is a particularly good fit. So that's one exception. We've had some other examples where folks from like the College of Design needed some more specific products that could allow them to have more design flexibility than what LibreText or Pressbooks options offer. So there are some options, but generally we want everyone to be using one of these two platforms. And the application process, you write your two-page proposal and you submit it along with some other course demographic information as a Qualtrics form. And there's calls for this. There's at least one in the spring and one in the fall. Occasionally we'll have 2 calls in a given semester. But that's pretty much it for the application process. You have a pretty good chance of getting funded. So this is our application numbers over time since the program started, and you can see how many were accepted and how many were denied. In general, we really like proposals that are for larger lectures, because that gives us the most return on investment by saving more students money by eliminating textbook costs. We also don't get that many applications for graduate level courses. So large lecture courses or graduate courses are of particular interest. But if you have a course in mind, please come talk to us and submit an application. And this is the graph of dollars saved by a fiscal year. So you can see how much money we've saved every year since the program started. All right. So one thing I also wanted to spend a little more time talking about is the $10 open textbook fee. And the administration for this has changed a little bit in the last 12 months. So initially there was like a Google form or something like that Carolyn Jackson would send out, or who is a librarian with the Open and Alternative Textbook Initiative. So she knew what classes had applied to get the $10 fee. And so she'd have everyone submit a survey that kind of documented that all the requirements are being met. What we've since done is that duty is shifted over to the registrar, and the registrar has then sort of kicked it down to the course schedulers. And so I'll use my courses as an example. So every time my soils or soil and water conservation classes are scheduled for the next semester, the people in my department will go through and they'll click the check box for making sure that it's actually tagged with this open textbook fee. And then that eventually goes to the college course schedulers and then eventually to the registrar. And so so this duty goes down to the course schedulers now, but it's everyone's responsibility to ensure that the courses that are being tagged with this fee are actually meeting the requirement. So the requirements are that the course needs to be one that actually requires materials. So a textbook, for example, and that if this fee is applied, there are no cost materials that are required, or there are no material costs for the students. So you can't apply for this fee and then turn around and have them pay for some paid textbook. There can't be any textbook costs or anything else. The one exception is iClickers. And there's more information on this on the Open Alternative Textbook Initiative website. All right, so that brings me to the platforms. So the 2 leading platforms out there. Let's see. So I got one question in the chat. What if there's a general lab fee for arts and sciences? So I don't believe lab fees. I think lab fees are an exception as well. So I don't think that would be an issue. I'd have to check with Carolyn, but I'm pretty sure that is not a problem. It's mainly just we don't want to tell students that we're charging them this fee to save money on textbooks and then turn around and make them buy textbooks. So that's kind of the main goal. All right, so the leading platforms out there, Pressbooks and LibreText are the 2. Pressbooks, I'll go to the next slide, and I'll say the Pressbooks is generally more established because it got kind of an early start for for providing a platform for book publishing. So Pressbooks is actually owned by WordPress, and WordPress is one of the largest like website creation platforms out there. And WordPress got its start with blogging. So I don't know about you all, but about maybe 15, 20 years ago, I was blogging, and I happened to be actually blogging on WordPress. And the user interface for the blog side of things is very similar to the user interface for developing these textbooks. So that's kind of one nice thing, is it's an easy to use interface. And how they got the idea was that they had all these bloggers that had all this content that they wanted to coalesce into an actual book that they could publish and sell. And they decided that they could do that in-house, and created what eventually became Pressbooks. And they also realized that there's as much demand for blogging book publishing as there is for publishing open textbooks. And so that sort of became their niche, is this platform for open textbooks. And the last pro with this is that there's no excessive branding. So the outputs, like the exports from this platform, are really professional looking and really nice. Some of the cons, I guess having it be owned by WordPress, I think is sort of a negative, because WordPress is a for-profit corporation, and sort of one of the side goals of all these open textbook projects is to try to avoid supporting large corporations, particularly in the publishing industry. And so this has sort of come to create problems recently, because they have changed they actually monetized this Pressbooks platform now. And so there is a subscription that's required. You can do like a free 7-day trial. If you're an individual author, you can pay, I want to say it's like $12 a month or something like that for up to one book. Or you can pay a larger fee and have like several books and collaborators on it. Most libraries, or not most, many libraries have an institutional license where they're allowed so many books at a given time. And that's what K-State has, is an institutional license with Pressbooks. So it does cost to actually have Pressbooks as an available platform. There's no harvesting. I'll explain that more in a few minutes. There's also no versioning. So versioning is where, let's say I developed an open textbook and someone wants to, within the rights of that Creative Commons license associated with that book, they can take that content and modify it and redistribute that. And they now have a new version of it. And so there's no tracking in Pressbooks of what's the original version, what's the new version, other than just like citing original sources. And along with that, like let's say Don wanted to use my soils lab manual for some reason, and but he wanted to teach it in a slightly different order. You could have the original version that's in the established order of all the chapters, or we can have the second version that has all those chapters kind of reordered in a new edition. And there's no way to track all that in Pressbooks. There's also less direct support. There is support, but I found that it's not quite as what I'd say direct as what LibreText is. And as far as integration with learning management systems, the only one that it currently integrates with effectively is Canvas. Which is great for here at K-State, where we use Canvas. But if you're somewhere else where you're going to use Moodle, or one of those other platforms, then it might not work quite as well. And the books, while they look really nice, it's really kind of hard to like fine tune the design, but it is possible. For LibreText, some of the pros with it is it's administered through UC Davis. So that if you look at the history of it, it started in their chemistry department. And if you notice on their branding, they have a little hexagon here, so that the guy that developed this actually teaches organic chemistry. So that's all the branding has little hexagons for all the OChem that I've long since forgotten. But they developed it as sort of a wiki, and then eventually developed it into this platform as they got more grants from NSF and other sources, and now it's sort of blossomed into what it is today. One big advantage with LibreText is that they have OER harvesting, which is basically where they have these computers that go and search the internet for openly licensed textbooks, and they basically scrape that off the internet and bring it into LibreText, all within the rights that are granted through Creative Commons licensing. And so they, so my Pressbooks lab manual, for example, it was harvested and brought into the LibreText. So there's now both a Pressbooks and a LibreText version, and I never had to do anything to actually create the LibreText version. It just did it on its own. So they have this algorithm that goes and scrapes the internet for this content and brings it into their system. That way people can readily start making changes from it. Now, one advantage of that is it's really easy to get a functional webbook launched. So I was having a conversation with a colleague earlier this week, and she has a lab manual that's developed in Word, I think, and she wants to bring it into a platform like this. And all they needed to do is just submit the Word document to it, and it will take that document and morph it into a functional textbook. So it's really easy to get a functional webbook launched. There's versioning where it actually tracks what the original version of the book was and all the changes from other people that are adapting it for their course. A great thing about where we are is that KBOR decided to go all in on LibreText, and we now have a KBOR system-wide license. And so all of the KBOR institutions can use LibreText and get all the most advanced options available to us. There's also some great homework platforms. I have not explored these much on my own, but an example that I've heard presented is there's like a writing like journal that so you can basically like have the students, instead of using Word on their computer, have them write all their content within this like journal online. You can actually track and see all the changes that were made over time, and see if there was things like, say, copying and pasting two textbook or 2 pages worth of content from ChatGPT. You can see that that's happening. So you can see all the changes that were made, and you get a little more control over things like that. And yeah, Andy asked, does also accept H5P activities? So both these platforms do H5P. So I don't have any experience with that, so I can't comment much further, but I do know they both do H5P stuff for interactive things built into the platforms. And one last thing I like about LibreText is that they have weekly office hours. So if you're having an issue with like one little thing you can't quite figure out, you can just drop into the office hours with Delmar, the guy that kind of runs LibreText, or one of the other full-time workers there, and they'll help you figure out what the issue is, and or if they can't figure it out, they'll work on it and get back to you. So I've found that their support is really, really helpful. Some of the cons for it, the biggest one I've found is that when I go to export content, there is this LibreText branding on literally every page that comes out as a PDF. So I find it very distracting, and I'm not a huge fan. I'm currently trying to figure out how to create a nice clean version so that I can submit it to New Prayer Press to get it published, but avoid like all this LibreText branding. So the exports aren't quite as finished as Pressbooks. There's lots of branding. And then the last thing I've sort of found confusing is that they have what they call the LibreVerse, kind of like Marvel Comics or whatever, where they have this like multiverse of all these different things happening at the same time. They sort of have that with different platforms that are all within the LibreText universe, I guess. And I find it kind of confusing. So I wish they could sort of streamline things like that. All right, so from here, I'm going to switch to my browser and do some demonstrations for you all. Okay, so I'll start with a landing page for the web book version of my annotated bibliography book. So we're going to start with Pressbooks first, and then we'll move to LibreText later. But this is the landing page for sort of like the cover page, if you will, for this book. And if you scroll down, you get the full glossary, and all these are hyperlinks. And you can expand these and find little subsections if you want to navigate directly to one of those. So I find Pressbooks is really easy to navigate. as a web book. So that's definitely a pro there. All right. I am going to switch to a different view. So I have all these windows open in my browsers just so I can kind of easily flip through all this. But this is like the admin side of this book. And from here I can go to say like organize, and you can see all the chapters in the book, and I can toggle these so they show up or don't show up in the web book version or in exports. And if I want to show the title or not, I can modify all those. You can see who the authors are for each different section. You can move chapters from one section to the or one part of the book to the next part. You can also add chapters as you see fit. So it's pretty easy to kind of handle the organization of the book. You can also do things like book info, which is all the sort of metadata you would think about for a published book. So you can control who the authors are, where it was published, publication date, ISBN, all the tagging that a library would use to organize it into the right spot, and copyright info. So that's all pretty easy to manage. But for individual chapters, like this is what the webbook view like that students would see would look like. So here's one of the chapters, and this one it's a chapter on conservation practices for farmlands, and I made it so that all the sections were collapsed, and that way when you're on a phone or on a laptop, it's just really easy to kind of quickly navigate to whatever section you want to. And let's see, I'll expand this one. So just click the plus sign, and now it changes to a minus sign, and now you can see all the content within that section. And for this annotated bibliography, what I did is every topic has an extension publication as well as some like usually a USDA sourced information on the same topic. And these are all hyperlinks that will open up into a new tab. And I try to make it so there's as many image examples of different practices as possible, along with captions, and there's alternative text that's built in there. On the back end, this is what that section looks like. And if I wanted to make some changes to this picture, you just click on it, and then it brings up this menu where I can move it to the left, right, or center. I can also click edit. And on the edit menu, this is where we actually get the option to add alternative text. And so this alternative text says contour buffer strips alternating between grass and row crops that are planted along the contours of the hills. So that would give someone that's using a screen reader the ability to actually like see what is being shown in that particular image. And you can do some more kind of fine tuning options for all the image properties. So one thing that is of note for accessibility is to make sure that all images have alternative text like this. And then another thing that is really important is instead of having just regular paragraph words that are like larger text and bold, we want it to actually be a true heading. And we'd use that up here in this user interface where we can click heading 1, heading 2, heading 3, and so on. So we actually want to use the proper heading. And so in this case, it's the highest level heading for this section. So we do heading 1. And if we have any subheadings, we can do heading 2 and 3 and so on. And so just using styles and using alternative text, I mean, that's probably the bulk of what most of the work is for making sure your content is accessible. You can also do things like add text boxes like I'm doing at the top. So in this case, because I'm dealing with a lot of government documents, there's a lot of acronyms. And so I made every chapter have a list of acronyms at the beginning, just to kind of speed things along. And then one last thing I want to point out for accessibility here on this chapter is if we look at this document, so this is a citation for a website. So if I click that, you can go to this website on prairie strips, which are little strips of prairie in between row crops, and they're planted along a contour. And so it's a great website, but I want someone that is using a screen reader to know that that's what they're going to click into instead of just blindly kind of clicking into it. And in addition, because it's an annotated bibliography, I needed the full URL to show up. And normally a best practice for URLs is to have regular text that would have a hyperlink attached to that text. And that way the text that's hyperlinked would describe what they're going to open. But we can't do that in this case because we needed an actual URL. And so in this case, what I had to do for, I think, 700 different citations in this book, I had to go through, and on the HTML side, so at the top right, I clicked the text tab. And so what I have highlighted here is what's showing up. So I go from the graphic user interface version to the HTML, so you can see that citation. And in here, see if I can find it. There's a thing that says ARIA label. And it says ARIA-label equals quote, and it says link to the Iowa State University Prairie Strip webpage. And so that would, so if someone that's using a screen reader would toggle over that link, they know that they can either click on it and go to that webpage, or they can just ignore it and keep on scrolling. So that just makes having an actual URL a little bit more accessible. And that was probably the biggest lift for this particular document. Let's go back to that version, and if anytime I make a change, I can go in here and I just click save, and over time it'll save all the revisions, and I can see that I've now saved this 32 different times, and I can actually go back and see the history of all the changes that I've made. So it's pretty easy to make these changes and kind of build it out. If you can make a Word document, you can make a chapter in Pressbooks. Okay, now I wanted to talk about the lab manual for a second. So for my Intro Soils lab manual, actually, let me show what the lab manual looks like to the students first. So this is what the students would see. I have it set up where all the labs have a text box in green for learning objectives, orange for materials, purple for recommended reading with hyperlinks. And so you can see here, this is the preferred way to do hyperlinks. The text tells you what the hyperlink is, and then there's a citation at the end. So that's the best way to do it. And in this book, there's a whole bunch of tables. And tables need to be formatted where there's an actual heading for each column in a table for it to be fully like ADA accessible. You can do simple tables in Pressbooks, but to get one that actually looks like nice, like this particular one, it takes a little bit more work. And so on the back end, this is what it looks like. All we see is this little code, and it says table ID 7_1, and then 7_2, and so on. So all these is just this little code that's in the on the admin side that tells it that in Table Press, which is one of the options or the menus on the left, there's a table that's titled table ID 7_1 that it needs to sort of query when it goes to display the page. And this is what the Table Press menu looks like. And so if I look at 7_3, I can click preview, and it'll pull up what that table looks like. So in this case, we have the instructor copy version of the table with all the answers filled in. But I can go in and actually like edit the table, and it gets kind of messy. This took a lot of work for this particular book just to make all the tables nicely formatted. But a key here was to make sure all of them had a proper heading so that someone with a screen reader can actually navigate the table. So there's a lot of ways we can modify how the users interface with this. But I just want to give you guys that info because that's could be potentially a big lift depending on the course that you're trying to teach. Some other examples for this one. Let's look at like this particular figure. We have alternative text in here that says forces acting on a soil particle falling in water, including the force of gravity pulling it downward and the forces of buoyancy and friction pulling it upward. So again, this is a good example of a functional alternative text that tells the reader what they actually would see if they could see the document. So and a useful caption. And one last thing I want to point out. So equations that are developed or displayed in Pressbooks are all done through LaTeX. And so this is what LaTeX looks like on my side. And if we go and look at what it looks like on the student side, it ends up looking just like a proper math equation. So that was a big learning curve for me because I didn't know how to code in LaTeX, but we got to figure it out. So, but that's kind of it for Pressbooks. Are there any questions on Pressbooks before we move on? I see there's a couple of questions in the chat. It's like there's some discussion about H5P that Carolyn's been handling for me.
Colby, can I make a comment?
Sure.
So I came in right as you were talking about the LTI in Pressbooks. So I'm not sure I got it quite right, but so correct me if I'm wrong from what you said. So I don't want to say anything, but the LTI in Pressbooks can be used in Canvas, but also in Moodle, Blackboard, and Brightspace.
My understanding is that it cannot. I think it only works in Canvas, but I could be wrong. But the last time I investigated it, which was a couple years ago, my understanding was that Pressbooks only integrates only integrates easily with Canvas, and they hadn't yet.
That's all changed. They've updated all kinds of stuff
okay.
since you did that. So they're really good about reacting to some of our requests if they can. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's one of the things they've been working on a lot. So
yeah, that's good. All right.
And I just also want to say before you go on, if you're intimidated by LaTeX or LaTeX, depending how you pronounce it, that is one of the few really great uses of AI. So I was really struggling with a very complex physics equation in Pressbooks. And I just put it into ChatGPT and it gave me the code for it. So that is one great use where there's no issue with privacy or institutional data or anything. It's a great thing that you can use AI for.
All right. So I wanted to switch to LibreText. I know people need to be wrapped up by 12:50. I'll stick around for questions after that, but want to wrap up my LibreText content by 12:50 here. So this is the lab manual that I developed for my soil and water conservation course, and I did it first in Pressbooks, and then I had them harvest it into LibreText. And I'm logged in, so you're seeing like the admin sort of version of it. What you normally see as a student is what you see on my screen here, and then the admin side, you could change like all the sort of metadata for the page at the top, including the cover page and so on. The user interface is sort of streamlined, which is good in some ways and bad in other ways, but it's pretty easy to use. And if I want to edit a page, like if I want to edit the homepage here, I just click edit, and it opens up a very similar user interface to what Pressbooks had that's down here. And when I'm all done, I have to click save there to show what to actually like publish those to the live version. That's what I'm going to do cancel for now. But it's set up where there's different sections or I guess chapters, if you will. So I guess it'd be sections. So I have one section that's a whole bunch of different lab activities. And if I'm look at one of those, so this is one lab activity, you can see that we have images with what will be alternative text on it. I also have some embedded YouTube videos and some math equations as well. So I think these also used LaTeX to do that. And if I want to edit this, just go up here and click edit. And one thing I haven't done yet, because this is still a work in progress, is add alternative text to this image. And so I click it twice. I got to double click it, and then right now it just has the image name as the as the alt text. And so in this case, I would say corn cornfield with young plants and corn residue on the soil surface. So that's good enough to describe kind of what is in there. And click save image, and now I've added alt text. So that's all there is to that. And another thing with this platform, again, we want to make sure we're actually using styles. And so if I look at this, I can see it's already set up as heading 2 in this case. I think heading 1 was for the whole like broad chapter or section level. And so the largest heading I have here is heading 2. And then I can have like subheadings. I'm not sure if I have any subheadings in here. Like this might be a subheading. Yeah, heading 3. So every time I have a subheading, it needs to be heading 3 and then heading 4 and then so on. Yeah, so that's kind of the basics. We've got a few more minutes. Is there any questions you guys have for me about either platform or anything you want me to show you?
Hello, Colby. Maybe Carolyn, I don't know. I actually have a question about your slide that you previously showed where a class cannot require any purchasing items if we were to use open textbook. I'm writing a textbook that is for a concrete class, undergraduate concrete class. And I already have a good draft ready to kind of publish thing. But the thing is that class has 2 components. One is the class needs standard code, building code, and that cannot have open access. But the textbook, what I'm making is open source. But they have to have that code to be able to work in the class. But that cannot be, so they have to purchase it basically. But only the textbook part is what I'm trying to make OER. So how does that work in that class then?
Colby, do you want me to answer that?
I would, yeah.
So, hi, Krishna. Nice to see you today.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so I think there's a little confusion here between the grant, which you were a grant recipient, right? And requirements for that and requirements to claim the course fee. So the course fee is separate. They're not really related. If you want to claim the course fee, the idea is that you provide the materials, textbook materials, teaching materials are provided free of charge. But that doesn't mean for your grant that you couldn't use something else as well. So, so for your specific textbook that you're creating, and to get the grant is that those will be open educational resources, but you could still have something else you use in your class if you need to.
And the follow-up question, I think that's the last one. So the textbook that I'm writing has very, very integrated technical detail in it, and I want to use that as a trial basis in the classroom so that I can see more errors and I can correct it. I kind of trial run. Can I trial run without publishing that course, or I can make a PDF out of it and just use in the class? But I wanted to see if I can still have that $10 fee applied to that class, but without publishing. Is that possible?
So if there's 2 requirements for the class, right? For the course fee, I'm sorry. The first one is that there has to be some sort of materials required. And the second one is that you can't charge for any materials. That's all we do. That's it.
Okay.
You don't have to be a grant recipient. You can use open resources. You can use alternatives. So it could be a library book that you use, or it could be journal articles, or it could be something else, but everything you use doesn't absolutely have to be open.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. So for my soil and water conservation class, we require, I provide the students a copy of a book called The Worst Hard Time, which is a great book about the Dust Bowl if you guys are interested. But I wanted the fee to help support the textbook. So I get $9 for every student for that. I was able to get the paper copies of this book for somewhere in like $7, $8 range, and actually used some money recently to get to like buy that in bulk. But now what I do is I just send the students a copy of this book for free, and then it still pay the $10 fee to help support the textbook. So at least I get a few dollars per student for that, but they get a book out of the process. Um,
That's
so
really cool, Colby.
that's one way to kind of handle working around it, depending on how much the resource is that you need.
So,
Sounds
so,
good.
so the other thing you might do for that is to talk to collections development in the libraries, and they are content, what they call content development, and see if we can purchase you a copy, a digital copy with multiple seats, so students could access the book online. And the libraries can often, but we have to see how we can purchase it. Every publisher, everything has very different stipulations on every item. So you just don't know. And often if they see that we purchase a textbook with unlimited seats, all of a sudden they'll change how they make the book available. All of a sudden it's not digitally available. We want you to buy this book, or, whatever. So.
And you said there is some kind of a Google Doc to request the inclusion of open textbook in the class to fill out, so that it goes to the registrar and comes into that line item scheduling thing.
So that has recently changed. So it used to be like a survey that you would receive from Carolyn, or it would send out in the K-State Today, and you could fill that out if you wanted to apply for the fee. And now it's set up at the course scheduler's level. But we have to make sure that you're actually like following the requirements to actually get the fee. So Carolyn, you want to comment on that? It's a new process starting this semester.
I will comment on that. Yeah, the registrar has taken over the management of the course fee. And really left it up to the colleges or departments, whoever does your scheduling for you. It's really up to them. And I would like, there was a time where we would say, do you meet the course fee? And we would assess each class, but it's just not sustainable, right? And so what we do is we trust and try and verify. We trust that if you talk to your scheduler and say, I want to claim the course fee, and the scheduler says, have you looked at the requirements? And they say, yes, I have, and I meet those. And so that's how we trust. And that's what we did in the survey. We said, do you meet these two requirements? Certify you do. And we trust you guys to do that. So.
Thank you. That's all I have. Thank you.
And let me just say that your poor schedulers are, this came down at them pretty last minute. They're still trying to figure it out. I thank you for your patience on this. So.
All right, I'm going to interject there and take the opportunity to thank our presenter, Colby Moorberg, and Carolyn Jackson for also weighing in a lot of those questions. So thank you so much for helping us understand the open and accessible textbook initiative. We'll let all of you know that we'll have a post-event survey in the chat right now, so you can give us some feedback on this event. I'll remind you that we've got lots of events coming up. Next week, we have Dr. Doris Carroll be presenting on creating engaging classroom communication for student success. We had a whole bunch of other announcements about the Soto Showcase coming up, the Wakanzi Conference, and all of those kinds of things. So we got a lot of things coming from the TLC in the next little bit. But I want to thank all of you for taking time out of your Wednesday to be here with us. And Colby and Carolyn might stick around for 30 more seconds after the fact, but I just wanted to make sure that we were able to conclude while you're all still here. Hope you have a great rest of your afternoon, and thank you for supporting the TLC.
Thanks, everyone.